New Year's Eve was supposed to be a night of celebration, but I spent it crying alone on a bus stop bench 2 blocks from where the party was still going strong. I didn't even have a good reason to be that sad. Or maybe I did. It's just that nobody else would have seen it that way. Not the way I stormed out of a room full of people who barely noticed I'd left. Not the way my date had peeled off to kiss someone else at midnight without even glancing in my direction. And not the way my best friend told me, just before the countdown, that he was moving away in 2 weeks. Didn't want to ruin your night, he said. Too late for that. So there I was, in a coat that wasn't warm enough, wiping my face with the back of my sleeve like a kid, telling myself I was just cold, just tired, just drunk, even though I hadn't had enough to drink to forget that empty feeling sinking in my gut. And then he sat down. No, hey, no, mind if I join you? Just the slow creak of the bench and the weight of someone else easing into the cold space beside me. I didn't look right away. Just stiffened, expecting a drunk guy to hit on me, or maybe some rando to ask if I was okay. I was already rehearsing how I'd brush him off when I realized he wasn't saying anything, just sitting. After maybe a full minute of silence, I glanced over, expecting some sketchy dude, or maybe someone lost. Instead, I saw him. Not someone I knew, but not a stranger either. I'd seen him at the party. He was the guy by the makeshift bar, pouring drinks with a casual charm, talking to no one for long, tall, with messy dark hair and a black peacoat that somehow looked both expensive and too lived in. He laughed once at something someone said, and I remembered thinking his laugh sounded like it belonged in a movie. Deep, but not forced. Now he was here, sitting next to me. Quiet, hands in his coat pockets, eyes fixed on the sidewalk, like he wasn't trying to rescue me, just be near. It was weirdly comforting. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It didn't press me to say something. If anything, it gave me room to breathe. Eventually, I said, I'm not usually this dramatic, you know. He didn't laugh, but his lips pulled into a faint smile. You don't seem dramatic. I let out a shaky breath. I think I just hit my emotional quota for the year. He nodded, like he understood exactly what I meant. Then he said, I didn't want to be in there anymore either. I looked at him fully now. His face was tired in a way that wasn't about being sleepy. His eyes were kind, but something in them felt distant, like they'd been somewhere else all night. He turned his head, met my gaze. You want to be alone? I surprised myself by saying no. He didn't say anything after I told him I didn't want to be alone. Just nodded slowly, like that was enough to keep sitting there. I appreciated it more than he knew. The air was cold, sharp on my cheeks where the tears had dried. I could still hear faint fireworks echoing from the direction of the river. The distant noise of car horns and muffled music, people celebrating something I no longer felt part of. But here on the bench, with him beside me, the world felt quieter, slower. I'm Theo, he said eventually, his voice low and warm like he didn't want to startle the quiet we'd built. Eli, I replied, tugging my jacket tighter around me. He nodded again, still didn't look at me when he asked, Want to talk about it? I thought for a second, then shook my head. Not really. That's okay. And it was. I wasn't sure why, but I trusted that he meant it. He didn't press or shift uncomfortably, just let it be. But a minute later, I was the one who broke the silence. My friend told me tonight that he's moving to Chicago. He's the only person I actually looked forward to seeing this year, and he just dropped it like he was telling me what he had for lunch. Theo didn't react dramatically, just listened. And then my date, well, not really a date, more like the guy I've been orbiting all fall, kissed someone else at midnight, right in front of me. I laughed bitterly. I didn't even say goodbye, I just left. Theo was quiet for a moment, then, softly, That sucks. It did. It really, really did. I exhaled and let my head fall back, eyes scanning the empty street above us, the glow of traffic lights dancing off wet pavement. You. Me. What made you leave? He hesitated, his jaw tensed a little. Then, I guess I didn't feel like pretending anymore. I looked at him, really looked this time. His expression was guarded, but not in a closed-off way. More like someone who'd been asked that question too many times and never quite figured out the answer. I told myself I'd go for a drink, maybe meet someone, end the year on a better note than it started. But the second I walked in there, I just didn't want to be anybody. Not to anyone. I nodded slowly. I get that. He glanced sideways at me. I saw you leave. I think I was halfway to the door already. But when I saw you sit out here, I stopped. You followed me? No, he said, a faint smile forming. I joined you. Something about the way he said that made my chest tighten a little. In a good way. The kind that makes you feel less invisible. For a few minutes, neither of us said anything. And then Theo reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a little silver flask. He held it out wordlessly. I raised an eyebrow. Seriously? I figure warm whiskey's better than cold champagne. He wasn't wrong. I took a sip. It burned, going down, but settled in my stomach like a small fire. I handed it back, and he took a quick swig before tucking it away again. So what happens now? I asked. What do you mean? It's midnight. It's a new year. What do people like us do now? He gave a small shrug. I guess we start over. It was such a simple answer, but it landed in me like a revelation. Maybe that was the point of tonight. Maybe the heartbreak and disappointment and loneliness had to peak before they made room for something else. Starting over sounds exhausting, I said. Then we don't start everything over, Theo replied. Just the part that's not working. I looked at him again, and this time he looked back. His gaze lingered longer than before. There was something about him, something calm, steady, unafraid of the quiet. The kind of presence that made it feel like you didn't have to fill the silence with anything. I didn't expect this, I said quietly. Me neither. I tucked my hands into my coat pockets, my fingers brushing a crumpled napkin from earlier. It still had a smudge of frosting from one of the cookies at the party. I don't know why I hadn't thrown it away. Maybe it was the last comfort I had grabbed before leaving. Theo leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You know, he said, most people spend tonight surrounded by noise. Champagne, loud music, packed bars. But I think it says something that we both ended up here. What does it say? That maybe we were both looking for the same thing. Which is? He turned his head slightly, eyes scanning mine. A moment of honesty. Something real, something quiet. I nodded. I wasn't sure if it was the whiskey or the exhaustion or just the way he said it, but I believed him. And I didn't feel so stupid anymore for sitting out here crying where anyone could have seen me. The wind picked up slightly, rustling the trees behind us. I shivered a little, and Theo noticed. You cold? I shook my head, even though I was. But he was already moving. He unzipped his coat and shrugged it off. Here, he said, handing it to me. You need it more than I do. I'm fine. He gave me a look that said, don't argue. I slipped it on. It was warm, smelled faintly like cedar and something crisp, like cologne worn down after a long night. And somehow, it made me feel safer. You want to go somewhere? He asked after a beat. Not back to the party, just walk maybe. Or get something warm? I hesitated, and then I nodded. Yeah, I said. Yeah, I do. We didn't rush. Theo stood up first, brushing his hands on his jeans before offering one to help me up. I hesitated for half a second before taking it. His palm was warm, firm, but not too much. The kind of touch that didn't make a big deal out of itself, but somehow grounded me all the same. We started walking down the sidewalk, our steps slow, mostly in sync. The streets were quieter now. Party crowds had either moved inside or stumbled toward after-hours bars and late-night takeout joints. The cold had chased most people off the sidewalks, but we didn't seem to mind. Theo's jacket hung loose on my frame, but the warmth it held from his body was still there. Every so often, I caught the scent of it again. Clean, smoky, vaguely woodsy. It was stupid how comforting that felt. We passed a bakery that was closed for the night, its windows still fogged from a long day of baking. The glow from a street lamp above us caught in the glass and turned the frost into glitter. Neither of us spoke, not because there was nothing to say, but because silence was okay. Eventually, we turned down a quieter side street, one of those narrow ones lined with brick buildings and old iron lamps. It had that quiet kind of charm, the kind you miss if you're walking too fast or looking at your phone. We came to a small bench tucked outside a closed bookstore and paused. Theo glanced at me. "Want to sit?" I shrugged. "Sure, why not?" We sat, closer than we had before, not touching, but there was less space between us now. I could feel the warmth of him, the steadiness of his breathing. There was something about him, some kind of ease that made me want to keep peeling back the layers. "I used to come down here a lot," he said after a moment, his eyes on the building across from us. "When I first moved to the city, I didn't know anyone yet. I'd walk around for hours just trying to feel like I belonged somewhere." "How long ago was that?" 3 years, he said. "But it feels longer. Or maybe shorter. Time's weird like that." I nodded. "Did it ever happen? Feeling like you belonged?" Theo took a breath. "I thought it had. But tonight, I'm not sure." I looked at him. "What changed?" He hesitated. "Then, I was supposed to spend the night with someone. Nothing serious. Just someone I'd been seeing. But when I showed up, he was already with someone else." "Damn," I muttered. "People really saving their worst for New Year's." He laughed, quiet and bitter. "Yeah. Was that why you left?" "That, and the feeling that I was just kind of invisible. Like I could have walked out and no one would have noticed." I turned toward him a little more. "I noticed." He looked at me, caught off guard for a second. Then a slow, genuine smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Yeah, I guess I noticed you too." A warm silence settled between us again. This one felt different, though, like something had shifted. It wasn't just two strangers sitting side by side anymore. It was something closer. "So what do you do?" I asked, wanting to know more. "I'm a bartender," he said. "Well, part-time, trying to get into community counseling. I've been working on some certifications." That surprised me. That's kind of perfect, actually. "Why?" "You seem like someone people talk to." He raised an eyebrow. "Is that a compliment?" "Maybe," he laughed. "What about you?" "Graphic designer, mostly freelance, which means a lot of ramen and staring at my laptop until my eyes want to fall out." He smiled. "You like it?" "Yeah," I said. "I do. Just wish it paid better and didn't make me want to throw my laptop out a window every 2 weeks." He chuckled. "Sounds like you're living the dream." I leaned back against the bench, looking up at the soft glow of the street lamp above us. "This is the first time I've felt okay all night." Theo was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Same." Our eyes met again. I wasn't sure how long we looked at each other, but it didn't feel awkward. It felt like he was trying to read something in me, and maybe I was doing the same. He broke the gaze first, looking down with a small smile. "You know, if this were a movie, this would be the part where we kiss." I laughed nervously. "Yeah, probably." He looked up again, a little more serious. "But I don't want this to be a movie. I don't want it to be some random New Year's fluke." That caught me off guard. I studied him. He meant it. "Me neither," I said. The weight of that settled between us. Not heavy, not demanding, just real. And then he said, "Come on. There's a coffee shop down the street that stays open all night on holidays. It's warm, quiet, and they have these weird-ass cookies that taste like cardboard, but in a good way." I smiled. "Sounds perfect." We stood again. This time, we didn't just walk side by side. His arm brushed mine, and neither of us moved away. The coffee shop wasn't much to look at from the outside. Just a faded green awning and a neon open sign that flickered like it was one cold gust from giving up. But inside, it was warm in that overly heated way that made your skin sting at first, like your body didn't quite trust it. We stepped in, brushing off the cold, and were immediately hit with the scent of burnt espresso, sugary pastries, and what I swear was something like cinnamon and Windex. It was perfect. Theo led the way to a booth near the window. The place was nearly empty, just an older couple asleep at a corner table, and a barista who looked like she'd been riding the same high-caffeine wave since 10 p.m. She gave us a nod, barely looking up from her phone. Theo pointed at the counter. "Told you they had weird cookies." There was a glass display with exactly 3 lonely, oversized cookies that looked like they'd been there since last New Year's. One was chocolate chip, the other 2, unidentifiable. "Brave enough?" he asked. I smirked. "I'm not scared." He ordered 2 coffees and a mystery cookie, dealer's choice, he told the barista, and we settled into the booth. I wrapped my hands around the paper cup, letting the heat bleed into my fingers. I hadn't realized how cold I'd gotten until then. Theo sipped his coffee, made a face, then dumped 2 packets of sugar in. "This place kinda sucks," he said. I laughed, but in a charming way. Exactly. We sat there like that for a while, sipping bad coffee, sharing bits and pieces of our lives like we'd hit pause on everything else. I told him about my job, how I'd been freelancing since graduating, taking whatever gigs I could find, and occasionally getting paid in beer or exposure. He told me about bartending, how he liked the rhythm of it, the feeling of being in control in a chaotic space. "You get to see people at their rawest," he said. "When they're celebrating, or spiraling, or just trying to forget." "And that's what made you want to go into counseling?" He nodded. "I guess I just got tired of watching people fall apart and not being able to do anything about it." There was a softness in his voice that hadn't been there earlier. Something deeper. I watched him as he spoke, the way his eyes stayed steady, the way his hands wrapped around the cup, knuckles slightly pink from the cold. He had this quiet intensity that made you want to tell him things. Made you feel like it was safe to. The cookie turned out to be some weird oatmeal coconut thing. We split it anyway. "It's not good," I said after one bite. "Nope," Theo agreed, still chewing. "But it's better than how the year started." We smiled at each other. It was a small thing, but it felt like a turning point. "I don't usually do this," I said after a pause. "Stay out all night with a guy you just met?" "Yeah. Especially not when I've been crying on a park bench 10 minutes before." Theo leaned forward, his eyes steady on mine. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you did." I felt something shift in my chest again, like some wall I didn't even know I was holding up gave a little. "I think I needed this more than I realized," I admitted. He reached out, his fingers grazing the edge of my hand where it rested on the table. Just enough to make my breath catch. He didn't pull away right away, and I didn't move either. "I've had a lot of nights," he said, "but this one, I'll remember." The space between us wasn't really space anymore, and I realized I was leaning in. Just slightly. Not because I felt pressured or uncertain, but because I wanted to. Because for the first time in months, maybe longer, I felt like someone saw me. Not just noticed me, not just tolerated me. Saw me. Theo noticed it too. His smile softened. His gaze dipped briefly to my lips, then back up. But he didn't kiss me. Instead, he said, "Do you want to come back to mine?" There was no expectation in his voice, no push. Just an invitation. And something about the way he said it made it feel like he meant more than just a place to crash, not something cheap or fleeting, just not being alone. I nodded. "Yeah, I'd like that." He smiled, and this time, I didn't need to cry anymore. Theo's apartment wasn't far, 10, maybe 15 minutes on foot. We didn't talk much on the walk. The silence between us wasn't uncomfortable anymore. If anything, it felt necessary. Like we were both processing something bigger than what we could put into words. The city had quieted down by the time we reached his building. the kind of stillness that only comes after a night of too much noise. A few confetti strands clung to the sidewalk. A leftover bottle of champagne stood like a forgotten trophy by a fire hydrant. But otherwise, the world seemed to be holding its breath. Theo lived on the second floor of a narrow building, tucked above a corner flower shop that was dark now, but still faintly fragrant. He unlocked the door with a quick twist of his wrist, then held it open for me. His place was small, cozy, with mismatched furniture that somehow worked. A soft gray couch, a chipped coffee table, a bookshelf stuffed with paperbacks, photos, and the occasional mug or empty glass. Lived in, but not messy. The kind of space that felt like someone had built it out of pieces of themselves. "You can kick off your shoes," he said, towing his off at the door. I followed, already feeling the warmth from inside start to sink into me again. Theo disappeared into the kitchen and returned a minute later with 2 mugs. Steam rose from them in lazy spirals. "Chamomile," he said. "Don't judge me." I took it with a grateful smile. Not judging. We settled onto the couch, shoulder to shoulder now, the mugs warming our hands. "I like your place," I said. "It's tiny, but it feels like someone actually lives here." He looked over at me. "You'd be surprised how many people don't." I took a sip. It was a little too hot, but comforting. I don't know what I was expecting tonight, but it definitely wasn't this. Good unexpected or bad unexpected? I looked at him, his profile calm, his mouth half-curved in a teasing smile. The good kind. He leaned back, resting one arm along the back of the couch. His fingers brushed the top of my shoulder for a second. Accidental, maybe. But when he didn't move them, I didn't either. "Can I ask something?" he said after a beat. "Of course. What were you thinking when I sat down next to you?" I let out a breath, almost a laugh. "Honestly? I thought you were about to give me some weird speech about how everything gets better." "And now?" "I think you already knew better than to say anything." He nodded, that faint smile deepening. "I just knew I didn't want you to feel like you were alone. You didn't even know me." He looked at me then, full on. I didn't need to. I swallowed. There was something about that, about the way he said it, that made my chest tighten. He looked down into his mug like he was debating something. "I've been where you were, sitting on a bench on a night like that, thinking no one would notice if I just disappeared." My heart sank. "Theo." It was years ago, different circumstances, but same feeling. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to reach for his hand or touch his arm or something, but I didn't want to ruin the moment with a gesture that felt performative. "I'm glad you didn't disappear," I said. He met my eyes again. "I'm glad you didn't either." A few seconds passed. Then, quietly, he asked, "Can I kiss you?" There was no pressure in his voice, just sincerity, a gentle curiosity. I nodded. He leaned in slowly, like he wanted to give me every second to pull away. But I didn't, and when his lips finally touched mine, it wasn't the kind of kiss you'd expect from a New Year's hookup. It wasn't rushed or rough or greedy. It was slow, soft, careful in a way that made my breath hitch. His hand slid to the side of my neck, thumb brushing just beneath my jaw. I kissed him back, letting myself feel it, the weight of the day, the ache of the night, all of it folding into something quieter, something more real. When we finally pulled back, he rested his forehead against mine. "Still unexpected?" he whispered. "Still good." We didn't talk much after that. We just stayed close, our bodies curled together on the couch as the night faded around us. No expectations. No big declarations. Just 2 people who found something honest when the rest of the world felt like noise. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about what I'd lost. I was thinking about what I might have just found. I don't know when we fell asleep. One minute we were talking in soft tones, curled together on his couch, and the next thing I remember was waking up to the faint gray light of early morning peeking through the slats of his window blinds. Theo's arm was still around me, warm and heavy. His breathing was slow, even, peaceful. His cheek was pressed just barely against the side of my head, and I could feel the slow rise and fall of his chest. For the first time in a long time, waking up didn't feel like a crash. It felt soft, like the night had taken its time unraveling, and morning was just quietly asking if we were ready yet. I stayed there for a while, not wanting to move. I wasn't sure what I'd feel in the morning: awkwardness, regret, doubt, but all I felt was, okay, safe. Like whatever version of myself had sat on that park bench the night before had gently dissolved into something new. Theo stirred beside me. He mumbled, his voice still thick with sleep. Morning already? Barely. He opened one eye, squinting a little. Then he smiled. You're still here? Was I supposed to leave? No, he said quickly, then softened. I just wasn't sure if you'd want to stay. I didn't even think about leaving. Theo leaned in and pressed a kiss to my temple. Small, quick, but it made my stomach flip. Then he sat up and stretched, yawning. Coffee? He asked. I nodded, pushing myself up slowly. God, yes. While he moved around the small kitchen, I watched him. There was something intimate about seeing someone like that. Barefoot, slightly disheveled, in his own space. He didn't try to fill the silence with words or fake charm. He just brewed the coffee, set out 2 mugs, and smiled at me like it was the most natural thing in the world for me to be there. We sipped in silence at first, but it wasn't empty. I don't know what this is, I said finally, turning the mug in my hands. What's happening here? Theo sat across from me, his leg resting casually against mine under the table. Neither do I, but I know I'd like to find out. His answer was so simple, it disarmed me. I looked at him. I'm not great at this stuff. Relationships. Being open. He nodded. Me either. I let out a breath. I think last night caught me at my lowest point in a while. And still, Theo said, tilting his head toward me, you were worth finding. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was full. Like the kind of quiet that follows something important. I didn't expect any of this, I said. Theo reached across the table and took my hand. Sometimes the best things show up when you're not looking. I let his fingers wrap around mine, and this time, I didn't hold back. We spent the morning like that, talking, trading little stories about our lives, the worst jobs we'd ever had, our favorite childhood cartoons, the dumbest things we believed as kids. Every moment peeled something back, just a little. It wasn't dramatic or cinematic. It was better than that. It was real. At one point, he disappeared into his room and came back holding a hoodie. Wear this home, he said, handing it to me. Yours still smells like the sidewalk. I laughed and pulled it over my head. It was soft and a little too big. It smelled like his laundry detergent, and underneath that, like him. You look better in it than I do, he said, smiling. I'm keeping it, I said, grinning. You'll have to steal it back. I will, he said, but not right away. Eventually, I had to leave. I didn't want to, but the real world always catches up eventually. Theo walked me to the door, then paused like he didn't want to ruin the moment with a goodbye. I don't do flings, he said quietly. Not anymore. I nodded. Me either. Can I see you again? You better, I said. Otherwise, I'm keeping this hoodie forever. He leaned in and kissed me again. Not hurried, not desperate, just the kind of kiss that says, this isn't over. And when I walked back out into the city, the streets still quiet, the sky washed in the silver light of a brand new day, I didn't feel alone anymore. I felt found. The weeks that followed weren't perfect, but they were real, and that made them better. Theo and I started slow. Texts, a few casual calls. Then a coffee date that turned into a walk through the park. Then dinner at my place where I burned the chicken, and we ended up eating cereal on the floor and laughing until we cried. We didn't pretend it was some fairy tale. We were both navigating our own lives. Busy, bruised, unsure in different ways. But the night we met had carved out a quiet kind of trust. Something we kept building with every conversation, every glance that lingered, every moment of silence we didn't feel the need to fill. I'd never been someone who thought much about when you know. But something about Theo made things feel settled. Like I didn't have to keep performing to be liked. Like I could just be me. And he never tried to save me. That mattered. He didn't offer answers to problems he didn't understand. He didn't smother me with support I didn't ask for. He just stayed close, present, listening, the way he had that night. The memory of sitting on that bench was something I came back to often, especially when things felt messy. That small act. A stranger sitting down beside me without a word. That was the spark. That was the turning point. One Friday evening, I invited him over with no agenda. I was tired, work had been draining, and all I wanted was to sit on the couch with someone who felt like home. He showed up in sweats, holding Thai takeout and a half-used bottle of wine. I remembered he liked the green curry, he said, shrugging. And the wine's because I had a rough day too. We ate. We didn't talk about much. Just the kind of small things people say when they're safe with each other. Later, when the containers were empty and our legs were tangled on the couch, he rested his head on my shoulder and said, "That night changed everything." I know. He lifted his head to look at me. "I wasn't sure you'd let me stay." "Me either," I said honestly. "But I'm glad you did." "Me too." He kissed me then. Slowly. Like he didn't want the moment to pass too fast. And as I kissed him back, I realized something I hadn't been able to name until then. It wasn't about New Year's. It wasn't about being sad, or being saved, or being lonely. It was about being seen. Really seen. And I had been. By a stranger who didn't ask questions. Who just sat down and stayed.